I do hope you win, but this is why casinos are beautiful. Because you just give them your money. Have a great weekend. We'll see you Monday. And good luck with all your picks. Thank you for watching. That's
Starts off on a positive note of getting Lamar Jackson back Thursday night, which was great. He threw for 200 yards, did not look rusty at all. He only rushed for 15, but he didn't really need that. Lamar Jackson also threw for 4 touchdowns, 2 of which going to Mark Andrews. So guess who's back and relative again at the tight end position now that Lamar's back? Oh, wait, it's Mark Andrews. No kidding. I mean, the guy just catches touchdowns. It's Lamar's favorite guy in the red zone.
Fantasy Sports Today, only on SportsGrid.
If Jacoby Brissett was playing bad football for the past 3 weeks, Kyler Murray will be fully healthy, ready to go. Can't wait to get him on the field at Seattle and try to resurrect our season. Now you have Jacoby Brissett playing really good football. Putting Kyler Murray back in right now because he wasn't playing good football doesn't make any sense. The perfect storm here for Arizona. Hey, Kyler, going on IR takes the pressure off you. And Jacoby, you deserve the start. Go ahead and start, kid.
The Early Line, only on SportsGrid.
And the major thing you're going to say about Tom Izzo for the jump is, Tom Izzo don't duck anybody. You want to hear who they have to play preseason? Kentucky, Duke, UNC, and Arkansas. This is not the Jimmy Boeheim Don't Leave New York Carrier Dome Classic. This guy plays people.
College basketball today, only on SportsGrid.
We now have to figure out if they will be in the playoffs. They're the Super Bowl favorite and have shorter odds to miss the postseason as you and I sit here right now.
Right, but let me ask you this. Do you feel after this 5-4 record, 9 weeks, 10 weeks of the regular season, that their defense is as dominant as it was last year?
No, but the offense is better.
Pro Football Today, only on SportsGrid.
The NFL ratings are on a tear. Plus, why are so many college coaches getting fired? Front Office Sports Today starts now. Hi, everyone, and welcome to Front Office Sports Today, your look inside the stories that are shaping the business and culture of sports. I'm Baker Machado, and this podcast is brought to you by Invesco QQQ. Changing the game has always been our game. Access NASDAQ 100 companies in one ETF, Invesco Distributors, Inc. Now, coming up on the show, who should Penn State hire as their new football coach? We're going to ask Penn State's Board of Trustee and Joe Paterno's son, Jay Paterno, his thoughts. But let's start with the NFL continuing to set record ratings in the U.S. and abroad in today's main event. Well, ratings for the NFL this year are through the roof, as CBS says their ratings are the highest they've had for the NFL season since 1998. This is over 30 million people watched the Bills-Chiefs game last Sunday. So, could we also get one of the biggest rated games of the year ahead? Let's bring in Front Office Sports reporter David Rumsey for more. So, David, we'll get to some of the ratings here in just a moment, but let's first talk about the international game that we got this weekend, the very first game in Berlin. Good matchup, the Colts and the Falcons here.
Yeah, this is a very good matchup for the NFL outside of the U.S. You know, typically the long-running joke has been we just send the worst matchups, you know, the Jaguars and maybe another losing team over to London to play. And while that has been the case sometimes still this season, you're right, this is a great matchup for the very first NFL game ever in Berlin. Now, there's been games in 2 other cities in Germany, Munich and Frankfurt. And those have just been received so well by the fans. It's no surprise that the NFL wanted to add a third city in Berlin and continue to play there, which I think they will for many more years.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned all of that because next week we're going to get the Madrid game, and I believe that is the last international game we're going to have this year. But you're right, this is the most amount of international games we've seen on the NFL calendar. So would you think that the NFL, you know, maybe who might down the road won an international Super Bowl could say that, you know, this year internationally has been a great success for us?
I think it has. So there's been a record 7 games outside of the U.S. this year once we played the Berlin game and the Madrid game that you just referenced. NFL Commissioner Roger Goodell and several other owners have said many times repeatedly that they want to play up to 16 games abroad once they potentially expand the regular season schedule to 18 games. So I think that's probably something maybe more later this decade or even into the 2030s before we get there. But they do have the ability to play an extra 8th game outside the U.S. next year. We're talking about returning to all the places they've been this year, like Ireland and Germany and Madrid, Brazil, and then potentially even going back to Mexico. So we'll see where that goes. Of course, they're going to Australia next year, as well. There's really no borders for the NFL.
Let's talk here domestically. Obviously, ratings, as I mentioned, have been really good for the NFL. As CBS said that their Bills game that they had last week against the Chiefs, 30 million people watched that. That's the second most watched game this year behind the Eagles game against the Chiefs that was over on Fox. Any sort of interesting nuggets you're finding when you're looking through some of this ratings data for this season?
Definitely. So after we finished week 9, that's actually exactly halfway through the 18 weeks of the regular season. We get one bye week, 17 games per team. So halfway through the regular season, the top 10 most watched games, it's no surprise, is dominated by the Cowboys and the Chiefs. So the Chiefs actually have the 2 most watched games of the season. That Bills game you referenced that just happened this past Sunday, and then a week 2 matchup against the Eagles on Fox. They have 3 of the most 4 watched games, but the Cowboys actually occupy 5 spots on the top 10 list, which is a league high. The Chiefs do only have 3 out of the 10 most watched games so far this season. So the battle for America's team, at least on TV, is still heating up, I would say.
So, David, you mentioned those 2 teams right there, the Chiefs and the Cowboys. Those 2 teams play each other on Thanksgiving. So is there a possibility this could be the most watched regular season NFL game ever?
Definitely. That game on Thanksgiving Day is most certainly going to be the most watched game of the regular season. Typically, the Cowboys' Thanksgiving Day game is usually the most watched game of the season, no matter who they play. But yeah, this could set records for a Thanksgiving Day matchup. I mean, we're talking potentially north of 50 million viewers, especially with Nielsen's new ratings methodology this year, pulling in that big data that's just making all sports telecasts go up in their TV audiences. So yes, that's going to be a mega matchup. We'll see if the Cowboys and some of the moves they've made can get them maybe back closer to 500 by the time that matchup comes. But either way, it's going to be a huge game.
Rumsey, with the last little bit of time we have left with you, any other interesting things that you've noticed so far this NFL season?
Yeah, definitely. I think if we keep talking about ratings beyond the Chiefs and the Cowboys, there's only one other team on this top 10 list through the halfway mark of the season that appears twice in the top 10 most watched games, and that's the Eagles. And coincidentally, maybe not coincidentally, it's against the Chiefs and the Cowboys, those 2 games. So all the other games are just one-offs for teams, and we'll see what that ratings list looks like at the end of the year. But the NFL is having just another great season on TV, and of course, like we mentioned, the new Nielsen methodology is kind of helping that out. But the NFL remains king on TV and kind of trending back, really its best season in more than 10 years.
Yeah, really interesting to watch all of this. David Rumsey, a reporter for us here at Front Office Sports. David, thank you so much. Meanwhile, as the NBA investigations continue into Terry Rozier and Chauncey Billups, former Pistons guard Malik Beasley is still being investigated as well by the NBA in a separate gambling case, but does say he still has plans to come back to the NBA. So let's bring in Front Office Sports reporter Colin Salau. Colin, good to see you as always. You actually spoke with Malik Beasley's attorney. What's he saying here?
Yeah, he basically confirmed what Malik Beasley said, which is that he has not been cleared by the NBA's investigation into a gambling-related scandal, but he's also not barred from returning to the league. Essentially, teams are just not signing him because he's not cleared by the NBA's investigation, and Beasley is basically just waiting. He thinks he wants to go back to Detroit. It seems as though his agents and the Pistons are having conversations. Beasley said he's making his way to Detroit, but his lawyer, Steve Haney, told me that, he can't come back, or he's at least kind of sort of not being allowed to come back or not getting an offer. And he believes that it is because of what he called the, quote, NBA's ineptness, investigative ineptness. And essentially, I think he's basically alluding to the Terry Rozier case here, how the NBA investigated Terry Rozier, and then Rozier ended up coming back and playing 100+ more games after the NBA's investigation and has now been arrested. They don't want that to be the case with Beasley. We're not sure, or it's not confirmed that Beasley is not playing because of that, but that's what it seems to be if he's not been cleared by the investigation.
Especially given the fact that there were reports that until the announcement of the investigation was happening, there were reports that Beasley was going to make about $40 million on a new contract with the Pistons because he was such a huge part of their team, especially from three-point shooting. I guess saying all of that, do you think he ever does come back to the NBA, or is just now in this time frame of gambling and these allegations just now too toxic for him to come back?
It definitely is toxic, but if Beasley is saying these things, if he's staying in Detroit, if he's saying that his agents are essentially having conversations with the team, although the Pistons did not respond to a request for comment, I think he's probably has some basis for staying. Maybe he's still holding out some level of hope. He is reportedly receiving offers to play overseas. He said it himself that he could play overseas. So for him to stay here, even if it means getting a couple $1 million instead of $40 million from his original offer, that's probably saying something.
Colin, with the 60 seconds we got left with you, a congressional committee met with NBA officials this week about the gambling scandal. What do we know about this?
Right. So a couple of weeks ago, members of Congress penned a letter to the NBA and Commissioner Adam Silver, essentially requesting for a briefing about the two separate gambling cases that resulted in the arrest of 3 current and former NBA players and coaches, including Heat guard Terry Rozier and Blazers head coach Chauncey Billups. So the briefing in the letter was essentially asking for what is going on, asking for the documents, asking for the NBA to explain what led to these arrests. But also, Adam Silver has been adamant in talking about the need for more regulations. The Athletic reported that there was a meeting and a briefing on Wednesday. So this was actually past the deadline originally requested by Congress on October 31st. That didn't seem to be a problem. However, one thing that the Athletic did note was that this was a staff level meeting, meaning that NBA Commissioner Adam Silver was not present. Neither was Deputy Commissioner Mark Tatum. Instead, these were staff-level members and a gambling consultant.
A lot obviously happening here. Colin Silao, front office sports reporter, joining us here. Colin, thank you so very much. And coming up next, everyone on the show, why are so many college football coaches getting fired? We're getting some insight from Penn State next.
Sauce Gardner heading over to the Indianapolis Colts as they go all in on this season and beyond. As I think a lot of people have been noting, that move does not just say, hey, we like what we have this year. It says we like what we have moving forward, and that includes Daniel Jones as their starting quarterback for Dallas. What does that decision to bring in Quinnen Williams say? That means they're poorly ran, but we already knew that.
Game time decisions. Only on SportsGrid.
They didn't panic. They played like a championship team. They came back and destroyed them, probably cost Brian Kelly his job at least a week earlier than it might have happened before. But the fact is they are playing great. But like I say, I like the talent level of all those teams. And I think if you want to have a little bang for your buck and play around with a team that could slide in, Ole Miss might be that team.
The Bowden Blitz. Only on SportsGrid.
Governor calls you out in the football state, you're out.
And it was so funny, too, because after he fired Kelly on Sunday, right, Woodward released a statement that said that, in effect, that he was still in charge of the athletic department. Well, you didn't check with the governor because apparently he had other plans for the athletic department, and you're not in them.
The Early Line. Only on SportsGrid.
Football contest season is back, and so is the Las Vegas Football Contest Show. Season 2, the sharpest football contest show in the land. Focusing on all 3 Circus Sports contests and the Westgate Superbook Super Contest, we handicap the games and release our contest picks every week of the season. Featuring Super Contest champions Brady Cannon, James Salinas, and former NFL player Mike Pritchard, all team will have you prepared this season like none other. Check us out every weekend right here on SportsGrid.
And Welcome back, everyone, to Front Office Sports Today. I'm Baker Machado, and this podcast is brought to you by Invesco QQQ. In football, changing the game begins with rethinking it, like rethinking how players work on their game. And with wearable tech, advanced analytics, AI, and more, the same innovative thinking that changes the game could also change your portfolio. Invesco QQQ gives you access to the innovators who are rethinking the world, so let's rethink possibility. Well, since college football's playoff was implemented back in 2014, severance pay for buying out coaches' contracts now on pace to surpass $1 billion, including a record $185 million this year alone. This comes as 25% of the SEC schools are currently looking for a new football coach. So why are we seeing so much turnover? Well, let's bring in former Penn State assistant coach Jay Paterno. He's also the son to the late Joe Paterno and a current member of the Penn State Board of Trustees. Jay, such a pleasure to have you here. So I guess let's get to the big question. Why are we seeing so many coaching firings right now? It seems really unusual.
Well, I think it's a couple of things. With the signing date moved into December a number of years ago, I think that accelerated everybody's timetable because they want to save that recruiting class. The transfer portal has made really what you would call the Kurt Signetti effect. You know, him going into Indiana and turning around as quickly as he has made everybody really, really impatient. And I think those two factors have come into play to make fan bases and administrations and even boards of trustees very, very impatient in terms of wanting to see results in the field. No one's giving anybody a chance to build a program anymore.
Yeah, why is that? Is it because of the NIL and the transfer portal now? I mean, Steve Sarkisian had this interview the other day, and he said, there's all these open positions. Who are you going to fill them with? It feels like Lane Kiffin is the finalist for all of these jobs.
Well, you know, Lane Kiffin has an ATM machine right now called Penn State, Florida, LSU, Auburn. You just go down the list, and his agent is sitting there saying, oh, great, okay, I can play one off the other, off the other, off the other. Selfishly, I kind of hope that Lane Kiffin stays put. I think it'd be great for him and for Ole Miss to kind of send that message that this is a great place, but I'm not going to speak for Lane. I don't, you know, he's got to make his own decision. But I think what you look at now is the game has become so professionalized. Coaches are making so much money. Players are now making so much money that the fans and administration look at it very, very differently than they did 5 years ago. And the vitriol from fans has gotten a lot nastier because of that. I think that, and the impatience has become just like the NFL. Well, if we don't make the playoffs, get rid of them, get somebody who will. But we're talking some seriously real money now as it relates to what are supposed to be institutions of higher education throwing money to pay someone not to work.
Well, I mean, and your school's involved in this as well with what happened with James Franklin, obviously one of the biggest buyouts in college football history. Can you give us any sort of insight into what Penn State's looking for coming up next? Obviously, if you're going to replace Franklin, you want something better. Who's out there that Penn State sort of would want to sort of help take this program to the next level?
Well, 4 years ago, when we extended his contract to 10 years, I was not in the compensation committee, but a number of trustees on that committee talked to me about it. I said, look, I wouldn't give anybody a 10-year contract and guarantee all that money not because of James Franklin. I wouldn't have given it to anybody, simply because revenue share. I said, revenue sharing is coming. They thought I was nuts. I said, NIL is going to matter. All these things that people that are like looking forward, we're seeing coming. Weren't taken into account in that contract and the buyout, and they guaranteed every dollar on it. Now, when you look at where we go from here, you know, the big criticism about James Franklin was that he didn't get us over the hump. Well, what is the hump? Okay, if the hump is a national championship, there's only 3 active coaches right now who have actually done that. Dabo Swinney, Ryan Day, and Kirby Smart. And you're not getting them to move to Penn State, most likely. I'm certain, you know, in fact, not most likely, most definitely. So what are you going to get? Who are you going to get? And it's not like getting divorced. When you get divorced, you don't have to necessarily get remarried right away. You can spend time looking for the right person if you want to. With this, you better find somebody to hurry. I think what it comes down to this is this. Every school needs to define what they are. What makes us unique? What are the things where you can be successful at Penn State or Florida or LSU, whatever the situation may be, and then go out and find someone who fits that profile. And you know what? Everybody's got certain names they want. There are a lot of great coaches out there, some of whose names fans wouldn't even know. Oregon fans, I'm sure, were not well versed on what Dan Lanning had done when they hired him away from Georgia a couple of years ago, and he's been an incredible coach at Oregon. So there may be somebody like that out there that we don't even know about or haven't even discussed at Penn State. And then, there are guys that are coordinators, like a guy like Al Golden, who would be good as a head coach at a lot of places. Pat Fitzgerald is sitting out there. Now that Northwestern has cleared him, he's a guy that I think schools should take a look at. But, I don't want to get into necessarily saying anybody as it relates to Penn State, because this is going to be tough enough for our administration without a trustee sticking his nose in it.
Well, on top of that, I mean, we had North Carolina obviously go the NFL route, and we've seen what sort of happened with Bill Belichick there. And obviously everybody's trying to find their next Curt Cignetti, but, there's few of those, few and far between. Is the next mold going to be the Colin Kleins, the offensive coordinators of the Texas A&Ms, but they're in their early 30s? Like, what even is a college football coach right now that's going to pay dividends?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's, if you go back years ago, a lot of the ADs were football guys who had been former coaches and had their tentacles, and they still had a lot of contacts, and they could pick up the phone and call guys. In 1969, my dad was offered the Michigan job, and he turned it down, obviously, and thankfully, or, I don't even know, I don't know where I'd be right now. But that being said, when he turned it down, the AD at Michigan called him back a couple of days later and said, what do you know about a guy named Bo Schembechler, who was the head coach of Miami, Ohio, that nobody had heard of? And Joe said, well, I don't know a whole lot about him. Why do you ask? And he said, well, Woody Hayes said he's the best assistant coach he ever had at Ohio State. And Joe said, well, knowing Woody, if he said that, I'd hire him. And not that that's why he did, but the point is when Bo Schembechler was hired at Michigan, the headline Detroit Free Press said, Bo who, with a big question mark. And obviously that worked out. So I think the ADs that have to make these decisions have to think not just of the big obvious names, but also go start to search and talk to guys in the profession and find out who they might know, who might be a really good fit for their school.
We now have to figure out if they will be in the playoffs. They're the Super Bowl favorite and have shorter odds to miss the postseason as you and I sit here right now.
Right, but let me ask you this. Do you feel after this 5-4 record, 9 weeks, 10 weeks of the regular season, that their defense is as dominant as it was last year?
No, but the offense is better.
Pro Football Today, only on SportsGrid.
Fly Pelican, more like grounded Pelican. The Pelicans are 0-6 to start the season. Their main guys aren't their main guys. And it comes to a point where, what do you do if you are Joe Dumars and the leadership of New Orleans?
Pro Basketball Today, only on SportsGrid.
You want to throw $12, $13 million at Kiffin? That's always a possibility. Summerall, they lost the other night to, in that matchup to UTSA. Or do you go back to potentially the mad scientist and Nick Saban, give him, complete control of the athletic department and see if he can turn it around? We'll see. But whatever they go, they're going to need a coach to hit the ground running.
SportsGrid's College Football Today.
His daughter, she's on the OF.
Okay.
She's on the OF.
Is
now.
that right?
Yeah, she's on the OF.
So he's got
now.
an OnlyFans daughter and a little son
who says he can beat Curry and LeBron.
And he's coaching a team that was down 72 to
Keep
nothing.
that dude away from polite society.
Okay, by the way, I'm with you. I didn't know any of that is.
Newman's Pops gotta go.
The Craig Carton Show, only on SportsGrid.
Where does the college football landscape look like in, let's just say, 10 years from now? I'm a Colorado Boulder guy. I don't even know what the Big 12 looks like in 10 years from now. Is all of the power and concentration literally just going to be in the Big 10 and the SEC soon?
I think as of right now, yeah, but I don't think that's good for the sport. I think the sport needs to see more equitable distribution of the revenues. So, and it's, I know I sound like the new mayor of New York City saying that, but I mean, the reality is this: when the game is healthy across a number of leagues, I think it's healthier for everybody. I think we would all benefit if there was a scenario in where USC, UCLA, Oregon, and Washington love having them in the Big Ten, but if they could play more of their games on the West Coast, I think it'd be better for the game to keep the game viable out there and to keep fan interest. Right now, we're all benefiting from the fact that gambling has just exploded all over the country. So there are people watching games they normally wouldn't watch because they're on DraftKings or whatever platform they're on, and they're doing prop bets and all those things. But with those things come some real dangers to the sport as well. So you never get anything for nothing. But I think there will be a time when I think what's going to happen with college football is we're going to have to go to a situation where collective bargaining enters into this. We've got to settle down what, for lack of other term, what we call what is essentially the labor market, because the schools need some collective bargaining protections, as do the players. Because guys go in the transfer portal and they don't get picked up, now what do they do? So I think it's a matter of there's going to be still dramatic change as it relates to college football, just beyond the SEC and beyond the Big Ten.
Well, let's talk about this because you've segued perfectly in my next question, which is, Congress obviously is debating and discussing the SCORE Act, which would sort of change a lot of the parts of the NCAA, but then you have other people like Cody Campbell out there who say, look, the SCORE Act doesn't solve any of the problems. It's literally just modernizing the current standards of the NCAA. What happens here? Do we have a situation where these athletes do become employees? And what happens here in terms of Congress to regulate all of this?
Well, I'm an old school guy, so when you sit here and talk about them being employees and collective bargaining, it's not something that I love, but it's reality. And sooner or later, you got to face up to what you're doing. And right now, at a place like Penn State or Ohio State or Michigan or wherever, Alabama, we are essentially running what is, for lack of any other term, it's a sports entertainment enterprise. And I think COVID was a major turning point in where we had our athletes on campus, sequestered them, put all kinds of limitations on them. And the athletes and their families looked at us and said, why are we here having to do these things? Oh, it's because you as a university need that television check that you can only get if we show up. I mean, look, Dan Lanning's a great football coach. Ryan Day's a great football coach. If they were to play in the Big Ten championship game this December and the players walk off the field right before the game, I know both those guys, but I'm not going to sit there and watch them play cornhole for 3 hours and get excited about it and decide. So the reality is, without the players, that's where we're at. So I think that's going to end up showing up at some point, whether we like it or not. And until Congress, and there are some legal protections that face up to what we are really doing here, we're just going to see another continuation of lawsuit after lawsuit that jolt the college sports model with the latest ruling of a judge. It could happen anywhere in the country at any time.
Well, to that point, I mean, to go back to Cody Campbell, the famous Texas Tech booster, he's sort of been arguing to get rid of the NCAA. There should be a whole nother organization that's overseeing this, and then also amending the Sports Broadcasting Act so a lot of these conferences can pool all of their media rights together. He claims that will then help distribute a lot more money to women's sports, to Olympic sports, all of that. What's your take on that? Do you agree with him that the Sports Broadcasting Act needs to be amended so you guys can pull your media rights together? And do you think the NCAA needs to basically go out the door also?
Well, I've had my issues with the NCAA for a number of years, going back to some other things. But I think the reality is this: back when the Supreme Court blew up the NCAA's monopoly on broadcasting, a number of schools and conferences got together and formed what was then called the College Football Association, and had a national broadcast package. And the rights they were able to get, because they then controlled the inventory, were able to schedule certain games, changed dramatically. It went up by multiples of 2 or 3 to what schools were getting when they were on TV. Everybody got some money out of it, so there was some equitable distribution of the money, but also there was an incentive in that if you were the game of the week on the CFA package with they had it with ESPN and CBS, if you were the game of the week, you got a broadcast rights. I think it was $250,000 or $300,000 for being on CBS that week, which was up a multiple of 3x from what it had been. So there is historical precedent for what Cody Campbell is arguing.
Yeah, going to be really fascinating to see where all of this goes. Jay, such tremendous insight. Really appreciate you joining us. That's Jay Paterno, former Penn State assistant coach, of course, son to the late, great Joe Paterno, and, of course, the current member of the Penn State Board of Trustees. Jay,